Imagine waking up bound and surrounded by people who aren't looking at you like a prisoner, but like a meal. Their faces are calm, almost ritualistic. Somewhere in the background, you hear the crackle of fire and the sound of knives being sharpened. Your captors are not here to negotiate. They're here to eat you, piece by piece. Subscribe to Darker Days, where we uncover the most disturbing hidden truths from history. If you think you can handle this story, hit the like button now, because what you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart. 1. Ritualized mutilation before death. Across cultures, cannibals rarely killed quickly. Prisoners were tied to posts and forced to watch as others were cut apart first. Fingers, ears, or strips of skin were sliced away, cooked, and eaten in full view of the victim. Terror wasn't an accident. It was part of the ritual. Fear and pain were believed to season the flesh, making it more desirable. 2. The slow fire roast. In Papua New Guinea and West Africa, victims were tied to poles above low fires. The flames blistered skin and tightened muscles, inflicting unbearable agony. Pieces of flesh, often from arms or thighs, were carved away, roasted, and eaten while the victim still breathed. Songs and chants turned the ordeal into a public festival of horror, the smell of burning hair drifting for miles. 3rd skull splitter execution. Among Melanesian and Amazonian warriors, one blow from a heavy club crushed the skull while keeping the brain intact, a delicacy. Executioners often performed this in front of the whole community. The brain was scooped out and consumed immediately, sometimes mixed with spices. To many, it was a way of absorbing the victim's courage or intelligence. 4. Meal in waiting. Captives. In Liberia's civil war, cannibal militias treated prisoners as livestock. Captives were tied to trees, fed just enough to survive, and forced to watch others slaughtered and roasted. The psychological torment, knowing your body was someone's future meal, often broke people long before the knife touched them. 5. Limb-by-limb butchery. Some groups, from Aztec priests to Congolese warriors, prolonged death by cutting away body parts one at a time. Hands, arms, and legs were severed in sequence, each piece passed among warriors. The victim, restrained and screaming, was forced to watch their own dismantling. The heart, the ultimate prize, was taken last. 6. The Blood Bowl ritual. In Amazonian and Pacific warrior societies, captives were wounded to bleed heavily but not die. Bowls were placed beneath to collect the blood. Warriors drank it raw as a victory ritual, while the victim watched helplessly. The slow blood loss left the prisoner weak, dizzy, and terrified, dragging out suffering for hours. 7. Skinning alive. One of the most nightmarish punishments was skinning victims alive. In West Africa and Papua New Guinea, prisoners were tied to frames while skin was peeled off in strips. The act wasn't only sadistic, it was symbolic. Removing the skin stripped away identity, reducing a person to meat. The screams were often drowned out by drums or chanting, turning pain into ritual. 8. The smoking cage. Victims were locked in small cages set over smoldering fires. Smoke stung the eyes, choked the lungs, and slowly suffocated them. At the same time, the heat dehydrated the body and began cooking the flesh. Prisoners inhaled the smell of their own skin roasting, a torment as psychological as it was physical. 9. Organ removal. While alive. Hearts and livers were considered the ultimate delicacies. In Liberia and other cannibal cultures, warriors cut open captives while still alive, pulling out organs before devouring them raw. It wasn't about hunger, it was about dominance. Eating a still beating heart was a declaration of power. meant to terrify all who saw or heard the story. 10. Boiling alive. Explorers in the South Pacific described massive cauldrons filled with water and herbs. Captives were lowered in and heated over fire. Death took hours. In some cases, flesh was sliced off midway and eaten while the victim still screamed. Cooking and execution became one and the same. 11. Trophy head ritual. In many headhunting cultures, the head wasn't just a trophy. It was the centerpiece of the feast. Victims were sometimes kept alive until the moment of decapitation. Flesh from the cheeks and tongue was eaten first, while the skull was preserved or displayed as a symbol of victory. 12th Hunger Games captivity. Some groups starved captives while feasting in front of them. Prisoners were forced to watch as others ate, sometimes even human flesh, while they were given scraps. The humiliation and hunger broke them psychologically, leaving them shells of themselves by the time execution came. 13. Burning alive as a feast prelude. Victims were tied to posts. Small fires lit at their feet. The flames didn't kill immediately. They blistered and charred the flesh. As screams filled the air, warriors sliced away the cooked portions and ate them. Then the victim was returned to the fire. The cycle repeated until death finally came. 14. The Skull Cup. Among warrior societies in Asia and the Americas, skulls were cleaned, polished, and turned into drinking vessels. Consuming blood or alcohol from the skull of an enemy wasn't just symbolic, it was believed to absorb their strength. Even in death, the victim's body served their conquerors. 15. The soul-eating ritual. Some believed eating organs like the heart, brain, or liver gave them the victim's very soul. These ceremonies were often held at night, with chanting to trap the spirit. Each bite was slow and deliberate, a sacred act of dominance. Killing wasn't the end, it was transformation. The punishments of history's most notorious cannibals weren't random acts of hunger. They were calculated displays of dominance, ritual, and psychological warfare. For captives, death wasn't a moment, it was a process. And every step of that process erased their humanity before their life was taken. If you made it this far, you've just heard one of the darkest chapters in human history. Subscribe to Darker Days for more stories that history tried to bury. If you believe these victims should never be forgotten, click like to help share their story. Which do you think is more terrifying? Dying instantly in battle, or being kept alive to suffer like this? Let us know in the comments.